November 3rd, 1996. 2 in the morning. Tergo Tapid sat in the vortex core, wrapped in ascension fabric for the 37th time since March. Despite her many attempts, she could not ascend. Neither could Rose Roud, who had only made 2 attempts herself. Harriet Johanna kept watch from the attic. If anyone were to find out that Tergo Tapid was attempting to ascend, they would know a coup was underway. The attic door opened. Bishop Garrison entered. "Harriet, what are you doing in the attic?" Harriet Johanna panicked. "I have betrayed the ascended Rose. I deserve to die," she shouted, hitting herself in the face. Bishop Garrison then realized that Harriet Johanna was in the attic for the same reason as him, to keep watch for Tergo Tapid. He closed the door and left, without saying another word. Tergo Tapid felt that her command over Bishop Garrison and Harriet Johanna would be strategically vital in her attempt to take control of the vortex. Little did she know, an opposing alliance was flourishing. Yira Peoples and Nettie Hoyt, dissatisfied with the other spiritualists, began forming a new plan. November 11th, 1996. Nettie and Yira took a strapped oak chair to their pinpointed spot. They poked the pointy legs of the chair into the moist earth. Nettie strapped himself into the chair while Yira planted 10 rod devices into the ground. Nettie put his fingers into the rods. Yira kissed him tenderly before placing a metallic mask over his face. This was the reader chair, created by Nettie Hoyt when he was merely 9 years old. When operated by a skilled empath, a reader chair allowed one to communicate with the realm between dirt and soul, the gooey place deep within, the place that makes us gurgle. To put it simply, Nettie would use the reader chair to introduce himself to each of the 5 gnomes. He would then begin negotiations with the gnomes. Every day became similar. Tergo would sneak off and try to ascend in the early mornings, with the watchful aid of her dubious duo. Nettie and Yira would set up the reader chair, and Nettie would communicate with the gnomes. And Rose Roud, oblivious to it all, would watch her television, occasionally remembering to perform vortex-related tasks. April 11th, 1997. It was Nettie's 9th meeting with Carl, the 3rd gnome. When interacting with a gnome, one must be cautious. Gnomes can be extremely charismatic and fun to be around. They are very silly and good at tickling. Nettie Hoyt was skilled enough to handle it, though. He never acted silly with the gnomes. He never let them see him smile or tickle his sensitive places. When the gnomes acted silly, Nettie would sternly say, "No, we cannot be so silly right now. We must negotiate." And the gnomes respected Nettie Hoyt. So they listened. While Nettie operated the reader chair, Yira Peoples kept him moisturized and fed. Nettie had given strict instructions. "If you see me acting silly, unplug the reader chair." Negotiations were going well, and a deal was nearing. This deal would call for the spiritualists to allow the 5 gnomes to live on the vortex property with the conditional promise of no gnome attacks and limited proliferation. Constant contact would need to be maintained between the gnomes and Nettie Hoyt for the deal to be upheld. A high antagonistic gnome population makes ascension nearly impossible. Nettie knew this and felt negotiations were the only way to proceed. If the gnomes were on their side, he felt they would aid in ascension. Tergo Tapid also knew this. She disagreed with negotiation. She felt all the gnomes should be slaughtered instead, so she could ascend. May 3rd, 1997. Bishop Garrison walked the property, thinking of his dead twin brother, his dead mother, his dead father, when he noticed something in the distance. Across the lake, a strange vibration caught his eye. something twitching. He made his way to the other side, falling several times in the dirt. He reached it. He yelped in an effeminate manner. It was a gnome, the first gnome Bishop Garrison had ever seen. Curious, he grabbed a rock and threw it at the gnome. The gnome spasmed and spit goo. It made a strange screeching noise. Bishop Garrison threw another rock at the gnome. He threw another. 1 hour later, Bishop Garrison picked up the final chunk of dismembered gnome and tossed it in the lake. He ran to Turgo Tapid, giddy with joy. "I have done it. I have killed a gnome," said Bishop Garrison, walking into Turgo's room, covered in dead gnome goo. Turgo Tapid would celebrate by having Bishop Garrison pleasure her. She had only 4 gnomes left to slaughter. The next day, Nettie sat in the reader chair, waiting to meet with Tom, the second gnome. Tom would keep Nettie waiting for hours. This was unlike him. It would take days for Nettie to learn what Bishop Garrison had done under the orders of Turgo Tapid. Once he learned that a gnome had been murdered, he knew that his work was all for nothing. The great gnome negotiations were over. The gnomes were angry. The vortex was swirling, and it seemed Turgo Tapid would get her wish once and for all. Complete, total, true war.